we're just going to kick off the tractate of Bava Kama, which itself is the first tractate in the order of Nizikin. Now, Nizikin means damages. And the first three tractates are called Bava Kama, which means the first gate, Bava Metzia, which is the middle gate, and Bava Batra, which is the last gate. And the Talmud actually records that Rav Yosef in would Rav Yosef said, Kula Nizikin Chada Masechta. All of Nizikin is one tractate, i.e., these three gates, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, and Bava Batra, they're all one tractate essentially. But they're 10 chapters each. I suppose if they were together, it would be a giant tractate of 30 chapters. Bava Kama deals with damages, Bava Metzia with commercial contracts, and Bava Batra essentially was shared property, communal property. And then as we then go through the rest of the Seder of the Zikin, we'll get on to how courts operate, how punishments operate, and then we'll get into questions. There are tractates at the end that were essentially deals with material that was given in front of the Sanhedrin. So that's the structure broadly of Nizikin, that we're going to start with damages, we'll go on to punishments, and then we're going to go on to the organization of the court system. In order to understand damages, we need a few verses from the Torah, mainly around the Seder of Mishpatim. So Mishpatim is the first set of commandments that are given when the people come down from the mountain. So after the giving of the Torah, then the sort of the nitty-gritty begins on the laws of releasing a slave after 6 years. But then they go on to monetary damages. And there are different archetypes of monetary damages described there in the Torah Mishpatim, which is then going to be reflected in the Mishnah. So the first one is the goring ox, the chigof. When a man's ox injures his neighbor's ox and it dies. So we have here a living thing, which seems to be intentionally damaging a live person. And there is at first it appears there's some joint responsibility. They're going to sell the live ox and divide it up. And they're going to divide up the dead animal. There's also a question of care, or nodaki shor nagahu. If it's known that the ox was in the habit of goring and the owner failed to guard it, he has to restore ox for ox. In other words, he's fully liable for this. So the first archetype, the ox, is an animal that's intentionally causing damage. And if the owner isn't taking proper care of it, the owner is fully liable. The second category is the pit. When a man opens a pit or digs a pit and doesn't cover it, and something falls into it. So the damage is created in this context, not by something which is moving, but by something which is still. We would call it health and safety. There's a health and safety risk in the public space. Now, risks don't have to be static. So we could go back now to the ox, but think about an ox which is not intentionally causing damage, but accidentally causing damage via its nature. When someone who owns livestock lets it loose to graze in someone else's land, and the livestock is going to create damage via it might lean on a fence and push over the fence, it might step on something and crush something, just by not by its intention to cause damage, but just by its very nature, it may cause damage. This is moving damage, the livestock itself moving around. And finally, in a combination perhaps of the moving livestock and the pit, we've got the example of fire. When a fire is started and it spreads to thorns and the grain is consumed, the one who started the fire has to make restitution. Now, we started this fire just like we dug the pit, but the fire is fanned by the wind. And by the way, anything else could be fanned by wind. We might put an object on a high roof and it might be blown off by the wind. The fourth archetype is the type of damage which is caused by something which might be safe in its own place, but it's blown by the wind into another place, and there it causes damage. So these are the four archetypes that we need to keep in mind. And we're going to examine those through the first Mishnah in Bava. The Mishnah says, there are four archetypal types of damages. So we got our big four. Interestingly, the Mishnah likes to play with four. There are four children of the Seder. There are four promises made to the people of Israel. There are four cups. There are many, many examples of four. But here we got four kinds of damages. So the four archetypes are the ox, the pit, the beast which destroys, and the fire. These are the four archetypes. And they all have their own particular characteristics. The ox is not like the destroying beast. And the ox isn't like the destroying beast, and nor are either of these like fire, which is not alive. Shit. The destroying beast and the ox are alive. They've got the spirit living in. They're not like the fire, which doesn't have any life. And this one that tend to move around causing damage. And they're not like the pit, who doesn't go out and injure. The pit is static. So the first three, the destroying beast, the ox, and the fire, these are all mobile sources of damages, whereas the pit is static. But they have things in common. What they have in common is it is their way to do injury. They are liable to do injury. So we have to take care of them because they are known to be liable to do injury. And therefore you are responsible. So if you own one of these, an ox or a livestock or a pit or a buck, you have to take care. The owner has to take care. And when they do injury, then the person responsible is liable. And he's going to make restitution with the best of his property. So those are the principles which we're going to then flesh out through the remainder of the training. We have four archetypes of damages, three of which are mobile, and one is not mobile. The owner is responsible for making sure that injury does not take place. Be it for a static or for a mobile danger, the owner is responsible, and if the owner does not care, they need to make restitution.